Glasses. What's up, dogs? It's Cameron with Venus Theory, and today we're here to make a Reese bass using Operator in Ableton Live. Someone was asking about this on the Wavepool Discord the other day, and I made a quick little video, but I decided to make it into a proper tutorial because I know a lot of you guys use Ableton and you might find this patch useful. So let's dive in and get started. Alright guys, so we're here today to talk about making a Reese bass using Operator in Ableton Live, because I know a lot of you guys use Ableton and I don't really talk about it, but figured I might as well show it because Operator is an awesome synth capable of a lot of really crazy bass sounds. But everyone needs a good Reese patch, so I'm going to walk you through that today. So we're going to grab Operator, and that's the first thing we're going to need to do. We're going to need to enable oscillator B. We're going to turn this up to -12 as well. So both A and B are at a level of -12, which makes them the same volume. Next up, we're going to need to change our waveforms. So for both of these oscillators, we're going to set them to saw D. I believe this is saw digital is what that means. So it's just kind of a regular old perfect saw wave. And now we have this, which sounds kind of like garbage. So we're going to transpose this down an octave, and then we're going to need to start changing a few things in order to make this Reese-y. So we're like a quarter of the way there. First up, as always, we're going to need to detune these. So a value of about 25 on the fine of oscillator B seems to work well. But you can hear it's really not a Reese, it's more of this weird FM thing, and that's because Operator is an FM synth. So we need to go to our routing tab and we need to change this to this one right here, where all of these run in parallel rather than in series. So this bypasses the FM part of Operator, and now we get kind of a classic old Reese bass. How cool is that? So we're going to change our voices down to 1, so we only have one voice, which makes it monophonic. And then we're going to need to start changing a few things to really make this a little more Reese-y cool. So in the pitch tab here, we can enable this, and we're going to turn up our pitch envelope. You feel free to play with this value and adjust the envelope, but this will create that kind of like, you know, initial hit to the bass. So that's kind of your classic old school Reese-y thing. We could up the spread as well if we wanted to. However, this tends to work best with a third oscillator, so I'm going to bypass that. We're just going to leave it as is for right now. The filter we don't need to worry about, but one last thing we can do is enable the glide here and up this to about 300 milliseconds and just kind of play with it from there and adjust if needed. So now we're starting to get somewhere, but we do have a little bit of a lack of low end. So usually in this case, I'll use the third oscillator here, so C, and just use a sine wave and kind of mix this in. So now we've got a nice big beefy bass, and we don't want to detune this. So now that we have the bass out of the way, you know, it's starting to get there, but it doesn't really have that, you know, big sound to it. So onto the audio effects tab, we can grab a couple of things. We'll grab a couple auto filters, we'll grab a glue compressor, we could grab a reverb, because that's always good. Saturator can be a lot of fun, but basically the point of what I'm about to show you is just try a bunch of different stuff. So I'm going to bypass all this for now, and we're just going to work on this glue compressor. So I want to enable soft clipping, crank the makeup, and get the threshold down just a little. Alright, that's working. So this auto filter, we can enable this, and to kind of get that big Reese-y thing going on, usually what I like to do is just use a notch, and then you could turn up the LFO here and just set the rate to something fairly low. Or, you know, you could just automate this or just move the frequency around yourself. So that's kind of how you get that, but I find when you're using a notch filter, it's really helpful to have just a little bit of reverb at the end. So feel free to play with the decay time. I find usually about 500 milliseconds up to maybe 2.5 seconds works well. It just kind of depends on the track. But as I move this filter around, that really helps to kind of show that the bass is moving. Last couple things you can do is you do want to maybe use a high cut and just kind of get rid of some of the super high end of the reverb. That way it's kind of got this nice dark reverb to it, and it's not, you know, ringing out the high end all that much. And then you could use 2-notch filters and get really crazy. Another thing you could do is use a low pass filter, which gives you that dark, Reese sound. I find 12 decibels per octave works best for this. So we'll take this down to about 250 hertz. and we can move this around. It's also helpful to automate this throughout the course of a track to provide a bit of movement to the bass. And that's kind of the next thing I wanted to address is, you know, once you have like a low pass Reese, it is kind of hard to make it feel like it's doing all that much. So I find a chorus after the filter will really help with that. We could turn our rate down, maybe mix it in a bit less, mix it in more. Something like that. And then you could combine these filters together. So if we open this up a little more and move this filter around, so we have a notch and then a low pass, you can get a lot of really crazy movements. You could also set this to 24 decibels per octave and kind of give it a harsher cutoff. So since we have things routed this way, you know, what this is doing is this is kind of futzing about with the low end with a big notch filter. So you might turn the resonance up or down, just depending on what you want to do. But this is the basics of getting like a really nice heavy Reese. And then maybe at the end of this, we could add another glue compressor and just compress this by about 5 dB. We can enable soft clipping. So that way on the initial hit, we get just like a little touch of saturation. And then one last thing I find that a lot of people kind of struggle with. So once you have this low pass bass, you know, some people want that kind of airy high end, and erosion is a great way to do that. So I like to use wide noise, and then I'll just adjust the width of it, maybe about something like that. And we'll just kind of find a good spot for this. And we could take down the amount. And you could place this before this glue compressor. Get something like that going on. And then if you kind of wanted to bring out that high end a little bit more, the multi-band dynamics is a great way to do that. And instead of using this as a compressor, we're kind of just using this as an EQ more than anything. You might place this before the glue compressor and get even more soft clipping going on. And then after that, you could add another auto filter as a notch. And now we're starting to get more into neuro-based territory. But anyways, that's kind of the basics of it. One last thing I wanted to touch on is, we could probably get rid of this auto filter. So one last thing I wanted to touch on is using the OSR or other saturation modes in the filter. So adding a bit of filter drive will really help to kind of grit up the bass a bit more. So that's creating a big kind of Reese-y, neuro-y patch in Ableton Live. And, you know, feel free to experiment with this, turn off different things, turn on different things, EQ things differently, resample it, whatever you want to do. Because the world is your oyster. And that's it for this video, guys. So thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.